I'm Rizal Zulkapli. Welcome and thank you for joining us for the third edition of the Speakeasy with Rizal
and Rozina. To those of you observing the holy month of Ramadan, I hope you had a good buka puasa and may this month bring you blessings and guidance.
My co-anchor is of course Rozina Aziz, co-founder and CEO of Metamorphosa, a boutique consultancy offering customized leadership and personal branding solutions for individuals and companies. Rozina has vast experience in corporate Malaysia and she is also a global leadership coach.
Thanks, Rizal. Tonight we look forward to having a relaxed, speakeasy conversation with a notable global leader whose leadership journey at such a young age, the same age as Rizal in fact, has created impact felt by millions around the world.
And our guest this evening is Ahmad Ashkar, the founder and CEO of the HULT Foundation, the son of Palestinian immigrants. 11 years ago, Ahmad went on to establish a global organization that nurtures young social entrepreneurs who set out to build responsible enterprises with profitability and sustainability goals in mind.
I think Time Magazine and Bill Clinton calls the HULT Foundation one of the top 5 ideas changing the world, and Newsweek, Bloomberg and others call it the Nobel Prize for Students.
But Ahmad, at just 38 years old, you've created a global impact. You are a leading authority in entrepreneurship, innovation, venture philanthropy and also endowment.
So for those of you who don't know, he also serves on the as an advisory board member of the UNDP, and you are a member of the Entrepreneurship Expert Network of the World Economic Forum.
And Ahmad, some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. Do you think leaders like yourselves are born or nurtured, or is there a balance between the two? And do you feel that your upbringing as the son of immigrants has shaped you into the leader that you are today, Ahmad?
Well, look, that's a loaded question. And are leaders born or are leaders made? I think it's a combination of both. Certainly, as human beings, I teach a very famous course. It's called Born to Close, okay? And I believe every single person around the world, no matter where you were born, how you were born, the environment you were born in, has the killer instinct ability to sell and to close and to make something more of themselves than what they were predispositioned for. And my first slide in that training is simple. It's a baby crying to their mother for milk and to eat. And every mother nurtures its child. So we're born instinctively with the ability to close deals, to sell, and to get what we want. The problem is society skews our ability to understand and reduces our imagination to dream and be creative of the things we actually want. So I think it's a combination of something that's both nurtured and certainly that we're born with. You know, what drove me, of course, was being the son of Palestinian immigrants. Many immigrants around the world, my parents focused on sacrifice, education, and of course, raising good children that would come out to something greater than they were in their home countries, wherever they immigrated from. So certainly my Palestinian identity and heritage is something that certainly shaped my ability to become a leader and impact. And again, I never chose to be a leader. I just did what I thought was the right thing. I solved a big problem in the world, and as a result, found myself with millions and millions of followers and a movement which was born, which today is bigger than me.
So you talk about building minds who want to dream earlier. So a lot of people say to drive huge impact, one must dare to dream big. Without any entrepreneurial experience, you pitched this wild idea for the HULT Prize. And so what was that experience like, and what advice would you give to young leaders of today who, like you, may not be as confident as you were, you were 26 then, right? And they
25,
want to
25,
yeah. And they, like you, want to leave a mark.
Don't age me. I know, it's when you look back in the rearview mirror, it's always so humbling to see where you came from and sometimes where you are today. And in fact, because I'm still in my 30s, I can envision kind of where I'm going forward. But to you young people out there watching, Dreaming big and being creative is so important, but I always say dream big, but start small. Sometimes our dreams can be so big that they actually discourage us from starting. And in my upcoming book, The Pursuit of Impact, which will be released next month, I talk about starting and how to just go on a big idea. Because the difference between success and failure a lot of times is just, we say in English, ripping off the Band-Aid and just starting. And my advice to those of you out there that are unsure of your ability and maybe lack the confidence to get started, as long as you're solving the right problem, you have nothing to worry about. Solving the right problem with a big idea will ensure success. I will put money in any young person who has the willingness and the desire to have impact if that focus is put in a direction that solves a big enough problem that gets everybody excited in the event that your solution will be successful.
What we're really interested, and I think the audience is interested to understand as well, is the impact of the HULT Prize Foundation on the young entrepreneurs who have gone through your accelerators, your programs, and the enterprises that came out of it, was born out of the foundation, and then the world at large, because I know that you focus very much on sustainability goals. So when we want to talk about the scale, how huge has the impact been on the community, the HULT community, as well as the world at large? What scale are we looking at?
Sure. I think that's a great question. The scale of our impact that we've built over the years will have a ripple effect on society forever. You cannot measure it, because the fundamental core of what we do is we believe and inspire belief in young people to change themselves so that they can go on to change the world. Okay. And we've done that in the millions. I mean, in Malaysia alone, we have penetrated nearly every single English-speaking university there. University of Malaysia, Putra Malaysia, Tunku Abdul Rahman, Islamic, or otherwise. We're in over 25 universities where our programs are inspiring young people and teaching young people how to be the face of change in their local communities. And whether that's to create their own enterprise as an entrepreneur or influence the enterprises that they go on to work for to bring a shared value model to the workplace and to the society. Now, if you want to talk about scale, we operate the HULT Prize Foundation programs on over 3,000 university campuses around the world, representing 121 different countries. What that means is that every single year, we graduate more than 300,000 new leaders of change who think differently, who act differently, who stand ready and equipped with the resources and the network to create long-lasting change in society. And those numbers that you talk about are just, they're too big to imagine. And if you look at just the professional network, which is involved in the HULT Prize, you're talking about 50,000 professionals and experts who mentor and guide and teach our young community on how to change the world through business. Now, one of the unintended consequences that I never imagined, the HULT Prize, is the influence we're having on the adults, not just the youngsters. And if you look at universities, they're changing curriculum. I was just mailed this book yesterday. The management and collaboration. You can't really see it with my camera. The management collaboration, science of management principles teaches the methodology of the HULT Prize. We have universities which have launched full-blown degrees as a result of our training in social entrepreneurship. And we have governments who have launched centers of innovation and social innovation around HULT Prize. I couldn't have imagined this kind of impact when we started, and we are rewriting the rules of engagement of how adults interact with youth when it comes to impact and change.
And also, Ahmad, it's estimated that 90% of startups in America fail. 21.5% of startups fail in the first year, 50% in the fifth year, 70% in their 10th year. How different is that for the HULT Prize? And I know HULT Prize focuses on mentoring students, and students have their own different challenges as they're still studying, right?
So you might be shocked to know that I'm indifferent as to whether or not we launch a unicorn or not, a billion-dollar enterprise. Our goal is very simple: to create an entrepreneur mindset, not necessarily the enterprise that is going to create $1 billion in revenue. Now, that being said, our track record is very good at the HULT Prize, and we do have a number of companies which have valuations well over $100 million. And the reason you talked about those numbers, Rizal, but what those statistics fail to tell us, 90% of startups fail. But how many of those startups are solving the wrong problem? And that's the challenge you face with a lot of startups and startup accelerators. At the HULT Prize, our global community solves the problem that we ask them to solve. We have created the Entrepreneur's Playbook, which shortcuts entrepreneurship. We identify the challenge, we identify the white space, we identify the potential breakthroughs on the innovation side in manufacturing, production, distribution, environmental impact, social impact, and economic opportunity. When you're given the right problem and you're complementing that problem with the right network, and you're creating an environment where young people are competing for a $1 million startup award and potentially more funding that comes from our other means of finance. Like this year, we gave $100,000 seed capital grants in addition to our $1 million HULT Prize. You have unbelievable results.
Founding of creating businesses and enterprises, Ahmad, you founded Falafel Incorporated in 2017 with the aim to employ and feed refugees, and you plan to expand globally. What's the biggest difference between leading your own organization or enterprise and leading an organization that nurtures young social entrepreneurs?
It's a great question. So, one of the great reasons that you talked about impact leadership, I think one of my successes and my ability to build a movement and have a great staff and team is that I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not just some executive with a suit. I'm a rogue entrepreneur. I've had a series of my own startups and exits, and certainly Falafel Inc. is one of my greatest startups that I've had. Not by revenue, but by the potential for disruption. And there's a big difference in starting and founding a company that is a retail, food and beverage business versus a company that's more in the education space. And what you have to do is you have to hire differently. So the CEO that's running Falafel Inc., for example, he has a background in hospitality, and the hiring is completely different. I would never put my chief operating officer from the HULT Prize Foundation, Charlemagne Kanishu, who's been with me 11 years, one of my most trusted confidants, as the CEO of that company, because the skill sets just don't match. And I think what you have to realize as a great leader, you're somewhat like a great sports coach of a soccer or football club or a basketball team. You have to know how to put the right players in the right positions so that they can succeed, and then create the right incentives for them to be accountable, responsible, and successful in their organizations. And that's been my greatest success as a leader, putting the right people in the right places and encouraging and motivating and coaching and hand-holding them in the right way to be successful. And certainly, a lot of leaders get this wrong. Being a motivator is not necessarily the right skill that gets the employees to the finish line. Sometimes imagine motivating a highly capable and highly competent and willing employee will simply lead to less productivity. So what I've done a great job of is I delegate to the right people, I inspire the right people, and I coach the right people so that they can be leaders of change in their own right.
I know you talked about the biggest intergenerational transfer of funds set to take place in 2060. It was a whopping 60 trillion US dollars, and 5 trillion is set to be transferred. Well, I don't know if the pandemic is going to affect it by next year. What do you foresee to be the leadership trends for corporations and enterprises led by the millennials in the future?
First of all, Rozina, I appreciate you doing your homework. I saw a couple of promos where you're talking about the $60 trillion in intergenerational wealth transfer. And that's the impact that I'm talking about that we have at the HULT Prize. We bring, what I see as the obvious to the mainstream. A lot of this data that a lot of corporations and individuals and universities and even governments are overlooking. So this intergenerational wealth transfer is going to change everything we know about brands, about impact, and about society. Because for the first time ever in anyone's lifetimes, the people who control the money are in leadership positions of corporations, of governments, of societal influence. And what you're going to see is a move from shareholder value to stakeholder value. And this is the guiding principle, because no longer will it be okay for a corporation to just think about maximizing profits. They will need to maximize impact while being sustainable. And by 2025, which you're talking about in the next 3.5 years, the race will begin. Which company, which country, and which organizations around the world will win and put their flag in the sand as the companies which have tapped into this wealth transfer, which millennials will begin to dictate and demand products which are socially and environmentally responsible, and products and services which have the same, where impact is not just some byproduct, but impact is the offering.
Ahmad, there could be potential fallouts from that change in leadership. How do millennials and Gen Z prepare themselves to take over the reign from the more slightly older and more experienced generation in that sense?
Yeah, Rizal, it's a great question, and we have to be very delicate, and that's my role as somebody who's on the tail end of the millennial generation, and almost an Xer. It cannot be a hostile takeover, and oftentimes you find that mentality by millennials and especially the Gen Zers, where they are effectively looking at a exodus of the X generation and the baby boomer generation. That cannot happen. This needs to be a very timely, strategic passing of the baton, where young people learn the lessons and the mistakes that were made from our predecessors and lead with empathy, and servant leadership. You cannot do that if you are just ushering out this entire generation that's been leading for decades. It's very critical that we learn, we adapt, and we create our new systems for the future.
I think that's really interesting that you're talking about how the transition has to be not forced, it has to be handled delicately. How do you feel that with the transition, I mean, I think it will happen over time because 2060 is a while away, it's going to be progressive. How do you think this future leadership will change the worldview down the road?
Well, the good news for everybody is that capitalism will not go away. And the reason I say that's good news is because capital markets will adjust to the demand of the consumer. That's how economies work. Consumers always been king. And as the consumer behavior changes, you're going to see corporations also change. So no longer will a CEO be allowed to be in the public eye, flying their public jets around from location to location, because that'll actually have effect on the share price of the corporation. And capitalism will actually force corporations to adjust into this new consumer mindset, which considers impact first. So I'm not worried about it. It's just a matter of time, not timing. And that's why I'm very, very optimistic and I'm bullish on the future of my generation's ability to lead an entire generation to impact and a much more sustainable future, positive outlook on the environment and society than we've ever seen before. I do believe that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals will all be solved. It's a matter of time, and I think by 2060, we'll see that change starting to take place in full fruition, and we'll live in an entirely new version of what we see as the world today.
Now we're going to move on to the quick fire leadership questions. So this is a bit like the game show. Ahmad, for each of the questions, you're going to have just 20 seconds to answer. Are you ready?
This is the fun part, Ahmad, and this is the fun part, just to let loose and to take it easy.
You shake it out a little.
Yes.
All right.
So the first question is, you're so busy. You told us before we started the interview that you travel 200 days in a year. What do you do to reset and re-energize?
I watch movies, binge watch movies and TV shows, and eat.
What are you watching currently?
Oh, I just finished watching the Ozarks on Netflix, which I thought, because I'm from a small town in Kansas, I've been to the Ozarks, so I thought that was a really good, especially during Ramadan. I do a lot of binge watching, and then of course a good meal and cooking. You know, I love to cook and I love to eat and I love to just relax and turn off my mind whenever I can.
So this is a question. Which entrepreneur, you get to choose one, do you look up to the most and why?
Steve Jobs.
Oh,
and it's very clear. First of all, Steve Jobs never cared if anyone liked him or not. Mm-hmm. And I also find myself in the same boat. I don't work for the praise of others. I work for myself and to challenge myself and make my mother and father happy. That's my only priority. Two is I love his leadership style, and I do a lot of it where he always challenged people to do their best. He never asked someone if he never told somebody if something they produced was good or bad. He simply asked them one question: is this the best that you can do? And that was it. And I try to do the same with my staff. And I think he was a phenomenal creative mind and thinker. And he really didn't care what anybody thought of him, which I thought was a phenomenal leadership quality of Steve Jobs.
So I hear that the HULT Prize during its accelerators and summits, you guys play really good music. What music are you listening to right now? Do you have a specific playlist that you're listening to right now?
So let me just make something very clear. I grew up in the hood in Leavenworth, Kansas, in the '90s, which means that I'm a hip hop junkie, and you'll always find Biggie Smalls, Snoop Dogg, Notorious B.I.G. In on my playlist. So I'm old school '90s hip hop all the way.
And that's all the questions we can take tonight, Rosie.
Thank you so much, Ahmad Ashkar, for being our guest on the third edition of Leaders Speakeasy with Rizal and Rozina. For those of you who are unable to join this live show, the edition will be aired on Astro AWANI TV, link, website, mobile app, and YouTube channel.
And look out for the next edition of Leaders Speakeasy in the first week of May. Follow Astro AWANI on our digital platforms as well as LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter to get the latest updates.